The flagship of the Jari Dominion drifted across the darkness like a floating predator, its black metal hull reflecting the cold stars. Inside the command deck, dim blue lights illuminated rows of control panels, each one manned by a member of the Jari species. Their tall bodies and sharp features gave them an air of constant authority. They were used to ruling. They were used to fear. They were used to winning. But today, something felt different. The air was tense, like a string pulled too tight. At the center of the room stood Commander Tervok. He was known throughout the Dominion for his harsh leadership and his firm belief that every other species was weaker than the Jari. His armor, decorated with silver lines, showed how many battles he had fought and how many victories he had claimed. Tervok believed he understood every species the Dominion had conquered, but he did not understand humans. Rumors had reached him. Humans were strange creatures from a dangerous world. They were tough, too tough for a species that looked so soft. But Tervok did not believe rumors. To him, humans were just another group of animals pretending to be important. A Jari officer stepped forward and saluted. "Commander, the human envoy is ready." Tervok smirked, showing sharp teeth. "Bring him in. Let us teach this creature his place." Two guards led a human into the command deck. All eyes turned toward him. Sergeant Elias Ward walked with steady steps, his boots striking the metal floor with a quiet confidence that made several Jari officers shift uncomfortably. He wore simple, dark armor, nothing fancy, nothing decorative. His expression was calm, unreadable. He looked like an ordinary human. And that was the part that bothered the ZHAR. Tervok stepped forward until he stood directly in front of Elias. The difference in size was obvious. Tervok was a full head taller, with thick, powerful limbs. Elias looked smaller, lighter, easier to break at least. That was the assumption, human Tervok said, letting the word drip with disdain. "You have come to negotiate for your captured colony. But let us make something clear. People are in no position to negotiate." Elias kept his face calm. "We are here to talk peacefully. Release our civilians, and we can avoid escalation." The Jari officers murmured among themselves. Some laughed quietly. Peace with a weak species? Tervok began circling Elias like a predator studying its prey. "Do you know why your colony fell so easily? Because humans do not understand true power. You do not know what real strength looks like." Elias slowly turned his head to follow the commander's movements. "Strength is not measured by cruelty." Tervok stopped walking. His eyes narrowed. "Interesting philosophy," he said. "Let us test it," before anyone could react. Tervok lifted his arm and slapped Elias across the face. The sound echoed through the command deck. Jari officers watched eagerly, expecting the human to fall, cry out, or at least stumble. But Elias did not move. Not even a step. He simply blinked. Slowly the room went silent. Tervok frowned. You are sturdier than I expected." Elias turned his head back to face the commander. His voice was quiet, almost too soft for the room to hear. "That," he said, "was a mistake." Some officers felt a shiver run down their spines. There was something in the human's tone, something calm, something certain, something dangerous. But Tervok only laughed. "You dare threaten me? I could crush you with one hand." Elias did not answer. Silence stretched between them. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The sensors on the walls beeped softly, confused by the readings they were receiving from the human. His heart rate was steady. His breathing was controlled. But his muscles were preparing for something, and the ship's scanners could not. Predict what? Jari officers slowly reached for their weapons. Not out of loyalty to their commander, but out of instinct. Something was wrong. Tervok opened his mouth to speak again. But no words came out, because in the 4th second Elias moved. Not fast by human standards, but impossibly fast by Jari standards. His hand rose, calm and deliberate, and struck the commander with a precision that seemed almost surgical. The impact was clean, controlled, and Tervok fell. He did not scream. He did not fight. He simply collapsed as though someone had flipped a switch. Elias stepped back, breathing evenly, his face expressionless. On the 5th second, the command deck erupted in chaos. Weapons hummed as energy blades extended. Blasters charged, and officers shouted orders. But no one dared take the first shot, because the human, the fragile creature they expected to break, stood perfectly calm, and their commander lay motionless on the floor. He took down Terra-Born, one officer whispered, shock widening his eyes. In less than 5 seconds, another murmured, What kind of creature is he? A third asked. Elias ignored them. He did not raise his weapon. He did not move aggressively. He simply folded his hands behind his back and looked at the nearest officer with a steady gaze. Your commander chose violence, Elias said. I ended the threat. The room stayed silent. Slowly, the second in command stepped forward. His voice trembled. Weapons down? All of you. Several officers stared at him. But down, he repeated, louder this time. Weapons slowly lowered. Elias waited calmly. Your people are holding over 200 human civilians. I want them released. Now. The second in command nodded far too quickly. Yes, of course. At once, he turned to his officers. Send orders to release the prisoners immediately. Escort them to the docking bay. And be polite. Very polite. Elias did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply stood in silence. The same calm presence he had been the moment he walked into the room. But now, every Jari in the room saw him differently. Not as prey. Not as a weak mammal. But as something else. Something dangerous. Something powerful, as the officers hurried away to follow orders. Elias crouched beside the fallen commander. He checked for signs of life. There were none. The strike had been precise. Clean. Finally, he stood again and whispered under his breath, I warned you, second in command. Watched him carefully, afraid to even breathe too loudly. Humans, you are not what we thought. Elias turned his gaze toward him. No, we are not. He walked toward the exit as the Jari officers scrambled to clear his path. Behind him, whispers filled the command deck. Did you see how fast he moved? Our sensors couldn't even track it. Is every human like that? We need to rethink everything. And as the heavy doors closed behind him, the truth spread through the ship like wildfire. A single human had taken down their strongest commander in less than 5 seconds. The Jari Dominion would never see humans the same way again. The obedient command deck of the Jari flagship was quiet after Elias left, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence that came after a storm, the kind that made everyone afraid to breathe too loudly. Officers whispered to each other in low voices, still unsure of what they had witnessed. A single human had taken down their commander in less than 5 seconds. No weapon, no armor. Just speed, precision, and something else they could not understand. As the ship's doors slid open, Elias stepped into a long metallic corridor lit by pale white strips of light. His steps were steady, but inside, his mind was focused. He knew the Jari were confused, shocked, and afraid. He also knew fear made people unpredictable. Even though the second in command had ordered the release of the human civilians, Elias could not be sure anyone would follow orders without question. His mission was not finished. Not until he saw every human safe. Behind him, 2 Jari security officers hurried to keep up. They carried no weapons now, and their posture showed discomfort. They were assigned to escort him, but it felt more like they were trying not to provoke him. One of them cleared his throat. The holding sector is this way. Human. His voice trembled slightly, as if he expected Elias to react to even the smallest disrespect. Elias only nodded. Lead the way. As they walked deeper into the ship, many Jari workers stopped what they were doing to stare. Some stepped back into doorways to avoid his path. Others watched with wide eyes, whispering to each other. He could hear bits of their conversations. That is the human who. He killed Terra-Born in seconds. How can something so small move like that? Elias ignored the attention. He had been trained to stay calm, even under pressure, and this was no different. The Jari saw him as a monster now, a dangerous creature they never expected. But that was not his goal. He did not want fear. He wanted his people back. The corridor opened into a large atrium with high ceilings and a glowing blue map of the ship stretching across an entire wall. Officers moved quickly across different platforms, checking data, reporting updates, and avoiding his gaze when he looked in their direction. The second in command was waiting there, nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other. When he saw Elias, he straightened and tried to appear confident. "Your civilians are being gathered now," he said carefully. "We will take you to them." "There have been minor delays." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Delays?" The Jari officer swallowed hard. "Some guards refused at first. They did not believe the order was real, but we strongly encouraged them to obey." Elias could imagine how that happened. Tuvok's influence ran deep. Many officers had admired him, feared him, or followed his brutal philosophy. They would not adjust to his sudden death easily, but they would adjust. Fear was a powerful motivator. The second in command gestured for Elias to follow. Together they moved toward a lift at the far end of the atrium. The doors opened with a soft hiss, and the lift carried them downward, deeper into the ship. The air grew cooler. "The lights dimmer. Your people are held in the lower detention block," the officer explained. "It is designed for dangerous prisoners. We apologize for the conditions." Elias's jaw tightened. "If any of them are hurt, no," the officer said quickly. "No injuries. They were kept for political leverage, not punishment. They are unharmed." Elias stared at him, searching for any sign of a lie. But the Jari officer had been shaken by Tr Vok's death. He was not bold enough to lie right now. When the lift opened, they stepped into a corridor lined with thick, reinforced doors. Jari guards stood on both sides. Elias noticed their rigid posture, the way their eyes followed every movement he made. Their hands hovered near the controls for the energy blades at their belts. But none dared activate them. The second in command spoke loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Open the cells. All human civilians are to be released immediately." Some guards hesitated. One stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, we should wait for confirmation from high command." "This order is," the officer cut him off sharply. "Do you want to end up like Tuvok?" The guard froze. His face went pale, or as pale as a Jari could get. Without another word, he stepped aside and began entering the release codes, one by one. The heavy doors slid open. Inside the cells, Elias could see humans, men, women, and even a few children. Their eyes widened when they saw him. Some stood quickly. Some gasped softly. A few even cried from relief. A woman stepped forward from the nearest cell. "Sergeant Ward, is it really you?" Elias nodded. "I'm here to take you all home. Are you injured?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Just frightened. They kept us locked up, but they didn't do anything else." He exhaled quietly, relieved. Humans began stepping out of their cells, gathering in the corridor. They whispered questions to each other. How were they being freed? What happened? Why were the guards acting so strangely? A teenage boy approached Elias with wide eyes. "Did you fight them? Did you beat all of them?" Elias shook his head. "No. I handled what needed to be handled. That's all." But even that simple answer seemed to impress the boy. He walked away telling others. And soon the whispers spread. Elias defeated their commander. He beat the strongest one. They're afraid of him. The Jari guards shifted uncomfortably as they heard the humans talk. The second in command cleared his throat again. "We will escort these civilians to the docking bay. Your transport ship is already being prepared for departure. We want no hostilities. We want no trouble." Elias nodded. "Good. Keep it that way." Together, the group moved through the corridors. Humans stayed close to Elias, forming a protective circle around the children and elderly. Jari workers continued to stare as the group passed. Some whispered. Others simply moved out of the way quickly. In one hallway, A Jari scientist approached Elias with trembling hands. "Excuse me? May I ask? How did you move so fast?" "Our scanners," Elias gave a simple answer. "Humans adapt." The scientist opened his mouth to ask more, but the second-in-command quickly pushed him aside. Not now. When they reached the docking bay, the massive doors opened to reveal a human transport ship. Its silver hull looked scratched, but intact. Jari engineers worked quickly around it, detaching clamps and clearing the launch path. The humans gasped when they saw it. For them, this ship meant freedom, safety, home. Elias walked forward, inspecting the area. No traps? No tracking devices? None, the second-in-command promised. "We want you gone peacefully. The Dominion cannot afford more conflict with your species." A strange statement. Elias looked at him closely. "You're afraid of us now?" The Jari officer hesitated before answering. "We are. Cautious. Your kind is stronger than our records," said. "Much stronger." "We only defended ourselves," Elias said. "Yes," the officer replied quietly. "And that is what frightens us. You defend with the strength of a predator." Humans began boarding the transport ship. Families held hands tightly. Parents lifted their children inside. Some hugged Elias before leaving. Others simply thanked him with tears in their eyes. When the last civilian boarded, Elias stopped at the entrance and turned back to the Jari officer. "Tell your leaders something for me." The officer swallowed nervously. "What?" "Humans want peace, but we do not kneel. Remember that." The officer nodded quickly. "We will, I promise." Elias stepped onto the ship. The doors closed behind him with a heavy metallic thud inside. The humans filled the seats, still speaking in excited whispers. A pilot stepped forward. "Sergeant Ward," he said with a relieved smile. "We're ready for takeoff." Elias sat beside the cockpit and strapped in. "Get us home." The engines roared to life, shaking the entire docking bay. As the ship lifted off the platform, Elias looked out through the side window. The Jari officer stood at attention, watching silently, not with anger, not with hatred, but with respect and fear, as the transport ship shot into space. Leaving the Dominion flagship behind, Elias allowed himself to finally relax. He closed his eyes and let out a long, tired breath. The mission was over. But the galaxy had changed, and every species would soon hear the story of the human who defeated a commander in 5 seconds. The transport ship moved through the quiet darkness of space, leaving the Jari Dominion far behind. Inside the ship, the rescued humans spoke softly among themselves, still shaken but relieved. Some held their children close. Others stared at the metal walls, as if they couldn't believe they were finally free. Elias walked slowly down the aisle, checking on each person to make sure they were calm and uninjured. They all gave him grateful looks. Some whispered thank you. Some simply nodded. He didn't need the words. Their safety was enough. The hum of the engines vibrated through the floor, steady and calming. Elias stopped near the cockpit where the pilot and co-pilot worked quietly. The pilot turned when he sensed Elias behind him. "We'll reach Alliance territory in about an hour," he said. "Once we cross the border, we'll be safe." Elias nodded. Good, but his mind was not calm. He kept replaying the moment with Turvok. The slap. The 5 seconds. The stunned silence. He had acted on instinct, on training, on pure survival. He did what he had to do. But he knew the galaxy would not see it that way. To the Jari, humans were no longer a soft, harmless species. They were something dangerous. He didn't know if that was good or bad. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sergeant Ward?" He turned to see the same teenage boy from the detention block. The boy looked nervous but curious. "Can I sit with you?" Elias nodded and gestured to the seat beside him. The boy sat down and looked out the window at the stars rushing past. "Is it true what everyone is saying? That you beat their commander? All alone?" Elias kept his voice calm. "I didn't want to. He attacked me first." The boy nodded slowly. "Still, you saved us. My mom said if you hadn't come, We might have stayed prisoners forever. Elias didn't answer. He just looked at the passing stars. Sometimes doing the right thing didn't feel like victory. Sometimes it felt heavy, the boy continued. I want to be strong like that one day. Strong enough to protect people. Elias turned his head. Strength isn't just fighting, he said. Strength is staying calm when things get hard. Strength is protecting people without hurting others unless you have no choice. The boy listened closely. Do you think humans are dangerous? Elias gave a small, thoughtful sigh. Humans can be dangerous, but we choose who we become. That's what matters. The boy seemed satisfied with that answer and returned to his seat. Leaving Elias alone with his thoughts, the ship continued moving smoothly until the pilot suddenly stiffened and leaned forward. Sergeant, he said, voice tense, we're picking up something. Elias stepped into the cockpit. What is it? The co-pilot pointed at the radar screen. A Jari ship. Maybe two. They're trailing behind us. Fear rippled through the passengers as the news spread. Elias stayed calm. Are they closing in? No. They're keeping distance. Not approaching. Just watching. Elias frowned. Hold course. They won't attack. They're too afraid of another incident. He hoped he was right. The Jari ships continued to follow at a distance, their silhouettes dark against the stars. They made no threatening moves, no hails, nothing but silent observation. It was as if they wanted to be sure the humans really left their space safely. Or maybe they were making sure Elias didn't turn around. After several long minutes, the co-pilot exhaled. We just crossed into Alliance territory. They can't follow us now. The moment the ship crossed the border, the two Jari vessels turned around and disappeared into the darkness. The humans cheered quietly. Some cried from relief, but Elias didn't cheer. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger, when the transport ship finally reached the Alliance outpost. Medical teams and officers rushed into the docking bay to greet the rescued civilians. They guided the humans out gently, offering blankets, food packs, and warm smiles. Children were carried away to safe rooms. Families were checked for injuries. Elias stepped onto the metal floor of the docking bay, feeling the familiar comfort of Alliance territory. But before he could take 2 steps, a group of officers approached him. Sergeant Ward, said the officer in front. Command wants to speak with you immediately. Elias nodded. Figures. He followed them through the base, past rows of protective barriers and scanning equipment. Soldiers saluted him as he passed, not knowing what he had done but sensing it was important. Inside the command room, high-ranking officers stood around a bright holographic table showing Jari's space. They turned when Elias entered. Sergeant, one of them said, We receive reports from the civilians and from Jari transmissions. Elias said nothing. He waited. The officer continued carefully. They say you killed Commander Tiarvok with a single strike. Elias corrected him. It wasn't one strike. I moved in a way they weren't prepared for. They underestimated us. He was a threat. I neutralized that threat. The officers exchanged looks. Some impressed, some uneasy. A woman with gray hair spoke. Do you understand what this means? The Jari now believe humanity is more dangerous than they ever imagined. They may fear us, or they may try to prepare for us. Elias kept his voice calm. If they prepare for us, we prepare too. If they want peace, we can talk. The gray-haired woman nodded. We need stability, not war. But your actions have changed the balance. You didn't just defeat a commander. You sent a message to the entire Dominion. Good, Elias said. Maybe now they'll think twice before taking civilians. The officers couldn't argue with that. Another officer stepped forward. The civilians you saved are already being transported home. Their families have been notified. They're safe, thanks to you. Elias finally let himself breathe. That was the only part that mattered, but the officer wasn't finished. There is something else. Intelligence picked up internal chatter from the Jari. Your encounter with Tervok is spreading fast. Stories are growing. Some say you moved faster than their sensors. Some say you broke him with one hit. Some even claim humans can see in the dark or predict attacks before they happen. Elias rubbed his forehead. None of that is true. The gray-haired woman sighed. Truth doesn't matter. Stories matter. And right now, the Dominion is terrified. Elias stayed silent for a moment. What do you want me to do? We want you to rest for now, she said. But be prepared. You may need to attend diplomatic meetings. The Jari may demand to speak to you directly. They may fear you, but they will want answers. Elias wasn't excited about that. Understood. As he left the room, he walked through the busy halls of the base. Soldiers whispered as he passed. That's him. The one from the Jari ship. He beat their commander. He must be some kind of super soldier. Elias tried to ignore the whispers. He wasn't a hero. He was a soldier who did his job. Nothing more. He stepped outside to breathe fresh air. The base sat on a peaceful moon, with quiet skies and gentle winds. A comfortable place far from the cold metal halls of the Jari ship. But even in this peaceful moment, he felt the weight of what he had done. He looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Jari were already telling the story. A human moved faster than their eyes could see. A human killed their strongest commander in 5 seconds. A human walked out of their flagship without fear. It wouldn't take long for the entire galaxy to hear it. Elias wondered what kind of future that story would build. For now, he could only wait and hope that the next time he was called, it would be for peace, not war. Elias sat in a small room inside the Alliance base, a quiet place meant for rest, but he could not relax. The walls were simple and white, the lights soft, and yet his mind stayed sharp and alert. He knew the mission was over, but the consequences were only beginning. The galaxy was reacting. The Jari were reacting, and humanity would soon feel the effects. A soft beep came from the door. Elias looked up as it slid open, and an Alliance doctor stepped inside. She held a tablet and gave him a polite smile. Sergeant Ward, I need to run a few tests, she said. Standard check after a rescue operation. Elias nodded and let her scan him. She checked his heart rate, reflexes, and muscle tension. Her eyes widened at the readings. Sergeant, your stress level is lower than expected. Much lower. Most soldiers who face hostile capture situations show high strain afterward. She lifted her eyes to him. But you seem completely stable, Elias shrugged. I trained for situations like this. Stress is part of the job. The doctor examined the readings again. The Alliance has always known humans have strong survival instincts. But this is extraordinary. Elias didn't respond. He didn't like being treated like something abnormal. When she finished, she bowed her head politely and left. Elias sat alone again, thinking about the Jari ships that had followed them and the fear he had seen in their eyes. He didn't know what would come next, but he doubted the Dominion would ignore what happened. He didn't have to wait long. A chime echoed through the room's speakers. Sergeant Ward, report to Command Room 3 immediately. Elias stood, grabbed his jacket, and left the room. The hallway was busy with soldiers moving supplies, engineers fixing panels, and officers speaking quickly. When Elias passed by, conversations quieted. People stepped aside, giving him space. Some looked at him with respect, others with curiosity. He reached Command Room 3, where a group of high-ranking officials stood around a table displaying a large hologram of the galaxy. Red markers blinked across Jari's space. The gray-haired officer from earlier looked up. Sergeant Ward, thank you for coming. She tapped the hologram. We have received a message from the Jari Dominion. Elias raised an eyebrow. Already? Yes, she said. They sent it to hours after your escape. They want an emergency diplomatic meeting, and they specifically request your presence. Elias frowned. Why me? A younger officer answered, because the entire Dominion is talking about you. They believe you represent the true nature of humanity. Their words, not ours. Another officer crossed his arms. They think humans are extremely dangerous and unpredictable, especially after what you did to Turvok. Elias took a slow breath. So what do they want? Peace. Revenge. The gray-haired officer pressed a button, and a message played, spoken in the rough, layered voice of a Jari translator. To the Human Alliance, we request immediate talks. We must understand your species. Bring the human known as Elias Ward. He is essential. Without him, no discussion will happen. The message ended. The officers looked at Elias, waiting for his reaction. He simply said, "When do we leave?" The gray-haired woman gave a small smile. As soon as possible, within an hour, Elias was on a small diplomatic shuttle, heading toward a neutral station built on a floating asteroid. It was a place used for dangerous negotiations. Surrounded by guards from several species to ensure no one started a fight. As the shuttle approached the station, Elias could see the Jari ships already docked there, sleek, black, and sharp-edged like weapons. The air inside the shuttle felt heavier. The pilot spoke softly. "Good luck, Sergeant." Elias nodded and stepped into the airlock. The doors opened into a large hall filled with officials from both sides. The humans were tense but calm. The Jari looked restless, their sharp eyes flicking toward Elias every few seconds. At the center of the room stood the Jari delegation leader, tall figure with dark blue armor. His posture was stiff, like someone trying very hard not to show fear. When Elias approached, a ripple of whispers spread through the Jari group. "That is him. The one who killed Tiarvok? He doesn't look dangerous, but he is." Elias ignored the whispers. The Jari leader stepped forward. "Human Elias Ward, you are the one who defeated our commander." Elias kept his voice steady. "He attacked me. I defended myself." The Jari leader nodded slowly. "We have heard this. But your actions cause great fear in our ranks. Some believe humans are unstoppable." Elias shook his head. "That is not true. Humans bleed the same as anyone. We just don't break under pressure." The leader studied Elias for a moment. "Your species has strength we did not understand. Now we reevaluate." His voice softened. "We did not expect a single human to defeat someone like Tervok." Elias crossed his arms. "Maybe you should stop underestimating us." The Jari leader paused, then inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect. The human diplomat stepped forward and began the official discussion. "The Human Alliance demands that the Jari Dominion return all captured territories and never target human civilians again." The Jari delegation exchanged uneasy looks. One of them whispered urgently to the leader. The leader swallowed and answered carefully. "We will consider the demands. But first, we must ensure that humans do not plan to use their power against us." Elias spoke before anyone else. "Humans want peace. But we won't accept cruelty or attacks. If you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone." The Jari leader stared at Elias for a long time. His eyes were narrow but thoughtful. "Tell me, human, did you feel fear when you faced Tiarvok?" Elias answered honestly. "No." A wave of quiet shock passed through the Jari group. The leader asked again, "Did you feel anger? Hatred?" "No." "Then what?" Elias looked him in the eye. "Responsibility. My people were in danger. I acted to protect them." The Jari murmured among themselves. The leader slowly nodded. "Then perhaps your strength is not cruelty, but purpose." The negotiations continued for hours. Demands were made, questions asked, fears admitted. Through it all, Elias sat silently beside the human diplomats, watching, listening. The Jari kept looking at him, searching for weakness or danger. But Elias stayed calm. When the talks ended, the Jari leader approached him alone. "Human Elias, your presence forced us to see we misunderstood your species. We will reconsider our treatment of humans." Elias gave a small nod. "Good. Peace is better for both of us." The leader hesitated. "One more thing. Stories of your 5-second battle have already spread. You will be a symbol." Elias sighed. "I didn't want that." "Symbols do not choose their place," the Jari leader said. "Others choose it for them." With that, he turned and joined his group. The human diplomats approached Elias. One of them smiled. "Well, Sergeant, you may have just prevented a war." Elias shook his head lightly. "Let's hope so." They boarded the shuttle and returned to the Alliance base. As Elias stepped out, soldiers saluted him again, but now their respect was louder, clearer. The rescued civilians already informed of the peace talks clapped. when they saw him, but Elias didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone caught in the middle of something too big. Later that night, alone in his small room again, Elias sat on his bed and stared at the floor. The galaxy was changing. The Jari feared humans. The Alliance wanted to use that fear carefully, and he was at the center of it. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. The 5 seconds on that Jari ship had started something. Something no one could stop now. Elias lay back and closed his eyes, hoping for a few hours of quiet, but deep inside, he knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Elias woke to silence. A deep, heavy silence that felt different from the calm of sleep. It was the kind of silence that came before something important, something that could not be ignored. He sat up in his bed, the dim lights in his room slowly brightening. His mind was clear, his body rested, but his instincts whispered that the day would not be easy. A soft knock came at the door. Elias stood and opened it. Officer Hale, the gray-haired commander who had overseen the negotiations, stood there with a tablet in her hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes told a different story, one of urgency. "Sergeant Ward," she said, "we need you in the command hall, now." Elias nodded without asking questions. He grabbed his jacket and followed her through the halls. Soldiers and staff moved with tense steps. Conversations were held in low voices. No one looked relaxed. "What happened?" Elias finally asked. Hallie kept her eyes forward. "We received a new transmission from the Jari Dominion. It's not hostile. It's unusual." Elias frowned. "Unusual how?" "You'll see," she answered. They entered the command hall. A large screen flickered at the front of the room, showing the symbol of the Jari. Officers stood around the table, watching the display with serious faces. When Elias stepped inside, a few turned toward him. Some looked relieved. Others looked nervous. Hale walked to the table and gestured for him to stand beside her. "Play the message," she ordered. The screen shifted. A Jari figure appeared, an elder, judging by the faded scales and slow movements. His voice came through the speakers, rough but steady. "Humans of the Alliance," he began. "I speak as the High Consul of the Dominion. What happened with Commander Tuvok has shaken our people. Our warriors now question everything. Our citizens whisper of danger. Some call for war. Others call for surrender." He paused, breathing heavily. "But before we choose a path, we must understand humanity. Not through reports, not through rumors, through truth." The consul's eyes fixed on the screen as if looking directly at Elias. "We request that Sergeant Elias Ward visit our capital world, under safe escort, to speak before our ruling council. We must see him with our own eyes, hear his words. Only then can we decide whether peace with humanity is possible." The message ended. The room fell silent. Then someone whispered they want him to go there. "Alone?" Another officer muttered. "This is insane." Hala turned to Elias. "You don't have to do this. It could be dangerous." "Very dangerous." Elias studied the blank screen. "If I don't go, what happens next?" Hala sighed. "War, most likely. The Dominion is frightened. Frightened people make bad choices." Elias took a slow breath. "But if I do go, maybe it stops that." "Psst," maybe Hale said softly. "But you'd be walking into the heart of their territory." Elias looked around the room. Everyone was watching, waiting, hoping. He finally spoke. "I'll go." Several officers protested at once, but Hale raised her hand sharply. "Quiet." She turned to Elias. "Are you sure?" Elias nodded. "I've come this far. I won't stop now." Preparations began immediately. The Alliance arranged a neutral escort ship, small, unarmed, and heavily monitored by both sides. Elias packed simple gear. No weapons. The Dominion insisted on that. Before he boarded the shuttle, Hale stopped him. "Elias," she said quietly, "you may be the only person who can stop a war. Be careful, but also be yourself. That's what they fear, and what they respect." Elias gave a small nod. "I understand." The shuttle took off, leaving the safety of the Alliance base. Elias sat alone, watching stars drift by. Hours passed in silence. He thought about the battles he had fought, the people he had saved, the strange path that had led him here. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel special. He just felt responsible. As the ship approached Jari space, huge shadow-like cruisers appeared, escorting the shuttle with precise formation. Their sleek shapes glided like predators, but they did not attack. Escorts confirmed. The shuttle's AI said. Elias stared out the window as the Jari capital world came into view. A dark blue planet with rings glowing silver around it. The city sparkled like clusters of stars. The shuttle landed on a wide platform surrounded by guards. The Jari soldiers stood stiffly, their eyes locked on Elias as he stepped out. There was no hostility, only fear and curiosity. A tall Jari official approached him. Sergeant Elias Ward. Welcome. You will come with us. They led him through corridors carved from dark stone and glowing crystal. The architecture felt ancient, powerful, and alien in every way. Finally, they reached a massive chamber, the Dominion Council Hall. Hundreds of Jari filled the seats, watching as Elias entered. The air was thick with tension. At the center sat the High Consul. Human. The consul said, "You stand where no human has stood. Do you understand why we brought you here?" Elias answered calmly, "To know the truth, and to decide if peace is possible." The consul's eyes narrowed. "Yes, tell us, Elias Ward. How did you defeat Commander Tiarvok in 5 seconds? Elias paused. Because he made a mistake. He thought humans were weak. He thought pain would stop me. But humans don't break that easily, the hall murmured. The consul leaned forward. What drives your species? Why do you fight so fiercely? Elias looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the council. We fight to protect each other. We fight when someone tries to take our freedom. And we fight hardest when someone thinks they can scare us into surrender. A ripple of nervous energy spread among the Jari. The consul asked again, his voice softer this time. Do humans enjoy war? Elias shook his head. No, we hate it, but we won't run from it. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. Elias took one step forward. If you attack humans, we will defend ourselves. If you treat us with respect, we will treat you the same. If you want peace, you will find no better allies than humans. The consul stared at him for a long time. Then he finally spoke. You are not what we expected. You are not conquerors. You are not monsters. He straightened his posture. We see now that fear blinded us. The hall remained still as stone. The consul raised one hand. The Dominion will not go to war with humanity. We choose peace. A wave of shock spread through the chamber. Some Jari hissed in surprise. Others bowed their heads in relief. Elias felt the tension drain from his chest. The consul stood and addressed him once more. Sergeant Elias Ward, you have changed the course of our history. When Elias returned to the Alliance base hours later, the atmosphere was completely different. Cheers filled the air. Soldiers clapped him on the back. Civilians thanked him. Officers saluted him. Hale approached him with a rare smile. You did it, Elias. You actually did it. Elias shook his head lightly. We all did. Peace takes everyone. That night, sitting in his room again, he finally allowed himself to breathe freely. No alarms. No fear. Just quiet. He knew the galaxy would still face many challenges. There would still be dangers, conflicts, and misunderstandings. But the shadow of war had lifted because one alien commander had slapped a human, because a human refused to break, because 5 seconds changed everything. Elias closed his eyes, hoping the peace he earned would last. For the first time in a long time, he believed it might.